The mess hall at Naval Station Norfolk opened at 600. By 6:30, it was already loud, the kind of noise that came from hundreds of sailors eating breakfast at the same time. Metal trays clanging, conversations layered on top of each other, the smell of scrambled eggs and coffee that had been sitting too long. Kara Elaine Mitchell walked in at 7:15. She wore the same navy blue uniform as everyone else. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. She was 5'6", athletic, but the loose-fitting uniform hid that. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was different from any other sailor starting her day. But she was different, and she had been for a long time. The first thing Kara did when she entered any room was count the exits. It was not something she thought about anymore. It happened automatically, the way a heartbeat happens, without permission, without pause. 2 main doors, 1 service entrance behind the kitchen wall, 3 security cameras visible from her position. The one in the northeast corner had been broken for 2 weeks. She knew this because she had reported it herself, filed the maintenance request, and watched it disappear into the system without anyone acting on it. That broken camera was now part of her daily calculation. She picked up a tray, moved through the serving line, accepted eggs, bacon, toast from the kitchen staff. The server smiled and said something friendly. Kara responded with a short, warm reply, the kind of response that would make someone feel seen without drawing any attention. She had practiced this, not recently, years ago, during the early months of her cover assignment. By now, it was instinct. She found a table in the back corner. The position gave her sight lines to both main exits and the service entrance. She sat down, set her tray, and began eating. Kara ate alone every morning, not because she was unfriendly, because isolation was the price she had been paying for 8 months. 8 months of cover work at Norfolk, 8 months of being someone she was not, every single day, from the moment she woke up until the moment she closed her eyes. The loneliness of it was something she had learned to carry the way a soldier carries weight, without complaint, without acknowledgement. It was simply there. What no one in that mess hall knew, what no one on this base knew except for a handful of people in Naval Special Warfare Command, was that Kara Mitchell was a Navy SEAL. She had earned that designation 18 months earlier, graduating from basic underwater demolition/SEAL training at Coronado. One of only a handful of women who had ever completed the program. The physical demands alone had broken men twice her size, but it was the mental component that separated the ones who made it from the ones who didn't. The ability to function when everything in your body was screaming at you to stop. The ability to think clearly when exhaustion had turned your mind into static. Kara had that ability. She had always had it. Her official record at Norfolk listed her as a logistics specialist, 2nd class, clean evaluations, no flags, no attention. This was by design. The cover identity had been constructed by people who understood that the best way to hide someone in plain sight was to make them boring. And Kara Mitchell, logistics specialist, was the most boring sailor on the base. The truth was buried under 8 layers of classification. At a table 20 feet away, 4 male recruits were finishing their breakfast. They had arrived at Norfolk 3 weeks earlier, fresh out of basic training, carrying the particular confidence that came from having just survived something difficult, even though what they had survived was only the beginning. They were young, 19, 20, old enough to wear the uniform, not yet old enough to understand what it cost. The first of them was Tyler Hannigan. Tyler was 20 years old, from a town outside Houston, Texas. He was tall, 6'1", with broad shoulders and sandy brown hair that he kept shorter than regulation required. He moved through the world with the easy aggression of someone who had been told his entire life that he was exceptional. And in many ways, he was. His physical scores in basic training had been near the top of his class. His reflexes were sharp. His endurance was strong. But Tyler's confidence was not built on his own foundation. It was built on his father's. Colonel Brooks Hannigan was a senior officer in military intelligence. A man whose name carried weight in certain rooms in the Pentagon. Tyler had grown up in that shadow. Every decision he made, every benchmark he hit, every morning he woke up and put on a uniform, all of it was measured against a standard his father had set without ever explicitly stating it. The phone calls home were short, transitional. His father asked about scores. He did not ask how Tyler felt. He did not ask if Tyler was tired or scared or struggling. He asked if Tyler was performing. That morning before breakfast, Tyler had called his father. The call lasted 4 minutes. His father asked about his evaluation scores. Tyler gave them. His father said, "Make sure you stand out." Then the line went dead. Tyler hung up and did not feel proud. He felt the way he always felt after those calls, like he was being measured and had not yet been found adequate. Garrett Whitmore was 19, from a suburb outside San Diego, California. He was the smallest of the four, 5'8", with a lean frame that had not yet filled out the way the other recruits' bodies had. He had struggled with the physical benchmarks in basic training more than he let on. Not enough to wash out, enough to notice, enough for the drill instructors to notice. There had been a morning, early in the program, when Garrett had finished a run dead last. The drill instructor had said nothing. He had simply looked at Garrett with an expression that said everything words didn't need to. Garrett had joined Tyler's group not because he liked Tyler. He joined because Tyler projected certainty, and Garrett needed to be near certainty, the way a man lost in the dark needs to be near a light. Cody Brennan was 19, from the Bronx, New York. Cody was loud. There was no other way to describe it. He filled every silence with something, a joke, an impression, a comment that was sharp enough to get a laugh, but not sharp enough to cause trouble. He was the kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and have 3 conversations going within 2 minutes. People liked him immediately. It was a skill, whether he knew it or not. But there were moments, rare, quiet, when no one was watching, when the noise stopped. When Cody was alone, brushing his teeth before dawn or staring at the ceiling in the few minutes before sleep took him, his face changed. The performance dropped. What was underneath was harder to read. Not sadness exactly, something closer to emptiness. The kind of emptiness that gets filled by being around other people, by being useful, by being the one who makes everyone laugh. Cody followed Tyler because Tyler gave the group a direction. Without someone to follow, Cody didn't know where to point all that energy. Elliot Ashford was 20 years old, from a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. Elliot was quiet in the way that some people are quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they are listening to everything. He had dark hair, an unremarkable build, and eyes that moved across a room with a careful attention that most people his age hadn't developed yet. He had enlisted because he believed in something, not blindly, but genuinely. Service, duty, the idea that what you did mattered beyond yourself. That morning before the mess hall, Elliot had sat alone on a bench outside his barracks and read a letter from his mother. She wrote about his younger sister who had just started college. She wrote about a family dinner he had missed. She wrote the way mothers write to sons who are far away, with warmth that carried an undercurrent of worry she was trying not to show. Elliot had folded the letter carefully and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. He carried it with him everywhere. He did not tell anyone this. Of the 4 recruits, Elliot was the only one who had not sought out the group. Tyler had pulled him in, the way a gravitational force pulls in objects that happen to be nearby. Elliot had gone along because refusing would have required a confrontation he did not have the energy for. But something about the group's energy made him uncomfortable. A restlessness, an aggression looking for a target. He felt it before the mess hall incident. He simply did not act on it. Back at her corner table, Kara Mitchell ate her breakfast in silence. She was aware of the 4 recruits. She had been aware of them since they arrived on base 3 weeks ago. This was not because they were remarkable. It was because one of them, Tyler Hannigan, carried a last name that Kara had been focused on for 8 months. Colonel Brooks Hannigan, Senior Military Intelligence, Weapons Procurement Division. The man Kara had been sent to Norfolk to watch. The intelligence operation had been running quietly for 8 months. Kara's cover as a logistics specialist gave her access to the base, to the routines, to the patterns of movement that an intelligence officer like Hannigan followed when he visited Norfolk, which he did twice a month in meetings that were not on any official schedule. Kara had documented those visits. She had tracked the communications that surrounded them. She had built a file, piece by piece, that was approaching something actionable. And then, 3 weeks ago, Tyler Hannigan had walked onto the base as a new recruit. Hannigan's son. Here. At the same installation where Kara was running a covert operation against his father. Kara had reported it immediately. Her handler had told her to stay the course. The son's presence was coincidental. It did not change the mission. But it changed the risk calculation. If Tyler ever connected his father's name to Kara, if he ever mentioned her to his father, the operation could collapse overnight. So Kara had been watching Tyler, quietly, the way she watched everything, tracking his movements, his habits, his social connections, understanding who he was and what he might say, and to whom. She knew his training scores. She knew he called his father every few days. She knew he was the leader of a small group of recruits who spent most of their free time together. She knew his weaknesses before he knew them himself. This was her job. This was what 8 months of cover work looked like from the inside. A constant, low-grade surveillance of everything around her, every day, without pause, without the ability to tell anyone why. The 4 recruits noticed Kara around 0720. It started with Tyler. He had been watching her for a few minutes, not with any particular intent at first, just the idle attention of someone scanning a room. But something about the way she sat caught his eye. Alone, back to the wall, not reading, not scrolling a phone, just eating, quietly. Tyler leaned toward the others and said something low. Garrett laughed. Cody leaned in, interested. Elliot glanced toward Kara's table, then back at his own tray. He did not laugh. The comments began quietly, then louder. Tyler's voice carried just enough for Kara to hear, and she suspected this was intentional. "Look at her," he said. "Thinks she's tough because she wears the uniform." Garrett nodded, emboldened. "These women think they can do everything men can do." Cody cracked his knuckles. A habit, not a threat, though he probably meant it as one. Someone should teach her some respect. Elliot said nothing. He shifted in his seat. He looked at his hands. Kara heard every word. She did not react. Her expression stayed neutral. Her posture stayed relaxed. She took another bite of her eggs and chewed slowly and swallowed and reached for her coffee. From the outside, she looked like a sailor who had not noticed a thing. From the inside, something else was happening entirely. She was listening, cataloging, measuring the threat, not because she was afraid of it, but because threat assessment was how she moved through the world. 4 males, young, recently out of basic training, probably strong, certainly undisciplined, positioned at a table 20 feet away. Tyler was the leader. Garrett was the weakest link, insecure, looking for approval. Cody was noise. Elliot was the one watching her watch them, and he was not comfortable with what was happening. Kara noted all of this in the space of 10 seconds. Then she kept eating. The 4 recruits finished their breakfast and stood up. They did not leave the mess hall. They walked toward Kara's table. Other sailors in the area began to notice. A few heads turned. Most kept their eyes on their own trays. The tension was building the way pressure builds before a storm. Slowly, then all at once. Tyler reached Kara's table first. He stood directly across from her, hands in his pockets, chin slightly raised. "Excuse me, sailor," he said. The politeness was fake. Both of them knew it. My friends and I were wondering what someone like you is doing in the Navy. Kara looked up from her breakfast. Her expression was calm, neutral. She held his gaze without blinking. I'm eating breakfast, she said, simply, and took another bite. Garrett moved to stand beside Tyler, crossing his arms over his chest. That's not what we meant, and you know it. Cody positioned himself to Kara's left. Maybe you got confused during recruitment, he said, with a grin that was meant to be nasty, but mostly looked young. Elliot took his position to complete the circle. He did it because the alternative, standing apart, breaking from the group in front of everyone, felt too large a thing to do in that moment. He told himself it didn't matter. He was wrong about that. The 4 recruits now had Kara surrounded. She continued eating as if nothing unusual was happening. The mess hall was growing quieter. Conversations at nearby tables were tapering off. Sailors were turning in their seats to watch. A few phones appeared, held low, angled toward the corner table. Master Chief Ray Dawson, 52 years old, 28 years in the Navy, sat at a table near the far wall with a cup of coffee he had stopped drinking 3 minutes ago. He was watching the situation develop with the careful attention of a man who had seen dozens of confrontations like this in his career. He knew how they moved. He knew the rhythm of escalation. He knew that the woman at that table was not going to back down. He had seen enough of the world to recognize the kind of calm that comes from training, not temperament. He did not move to intervene. Not yet. Tyler leaned forward and placed both hands on Kara's table. The gesture was meant to intimidate. It was meant to close the distance, to make her feel surrounded, to force a reaction. I think you should apologize, he said, for taking a man's job. Kara set down her fork. She looked up at the 4 young men standing around her. Tyler, whose father's name she had been building a case against for 8 months. Garrett, who was terrified and didn't know it yet. Cody, who was performing for an audience he couldn't see. Elliot, who knew this was wrong and had chosen silence. Something shifted in her eyes. It was subtle. A casual observer would not have caught it, but anyone who had spent time in combat, anyone who had seen a trained operator move from passive to active, would have recognized it instantly. It was the difference between a weapon at rest and a weapon being raised. I'm not interested in having this conversation, Kara said. Her voice was quiet, steady. It carried clearly in the hushed mess hall. I suggest you all go back to your own business. Tyler did not move. Garrett did not move. Cody did not move. Elliot opened his mouth, closed it, said nothing. Across the hall, Master Chief Dawson set down his coffee cup. He had seen what he needed to see. He knew what was coming next. And he knew, with the certainty of a man who had spent 28 years reading people in rooms exactly like this one, that the 4 recruits standing around that table had just made the biggest mistake of their short military careers. They simply didn't know it yet. The fight lasted 15 seconds. It did not feel like 15 seconds. To the sailors watching, it felt longer. The way any sudden violence stretches time, compresses it, makes every movement feel both fast and slow at once. But the clock did not lie. From the moment Garrett Whitmore's hand closed around Kara's arm to the moment Tyler Hannigan hit the floor on his back, 15 seconds passed. That was all it took. Garrett moved first. He reached across the table and grabbed Kara's forearm with his right hand. The grip was firm, not practiced, not trained, just the instinctive grab of a young man who wanted to force a reaction. He wanted her to flinch. He wanted her to pull away. He wanted something that confirmed what he already believed about her. He did not get what he wanted. The instant his hand made contact, Kara moved. Not quickly, the way someone startled moves. Precisely the way someone trained moves. There is a difference between speed and efficiency. Speed is fast. Efficiency is fast and does not waste a single motion. What Kara did in the next 3 seconds was efficient. She caught Garrett's extended wrist with her left hand and locked the joint. a controlled rotation that shifted the bones against each other and made it impossible for him to tighten his grip without breaking something. Simultaneously, she stepped forward out of her chair, closing the distance between them, and drove her right elbow into his solar plexus. The strike landed on the celiac plexus, a cluster of nerves just below the sternum that, when struck with enough force and precision, shuts down the breathing reflex entirely. Not permanently, for long enough. Garrett doubled over. The air left his body in a single, involuntary gasp. His legs went soft. He stumbled backward, hands dropping to his sides, trying to pull a breath that wouldn't come. He was out of the fight, completely, in less than 2 seconds. Kara did not stop. She used Garrett's stumble to create distance from the remaining 3, pivoting on her back foot so that she had clear sightlines to Tyler, Cody, and Elliot simultaneously. The mess hall was loud now. Surprise shouts, the scrape of chairs being pushed back, the sound of trays rattling as people stood up to see what was happening. Cell phones were out, multiple angles, multiple recordings. Cody Brennan was the next to move. His instincts were street-bred, fast, aggressive, uncoordinated. He lunged forward from Kara's left side, arms extended, reaching for her shoulders. It was the kind of attack that worked against someone who wasn't expecting it. Kara was expecting it. She had seen him shift his weight 2 seconds before he moved. A tell she had been trained to read, the way a sniper reads wind. She dropped her center of gravity and ducked under his outstretched arms. As he passed over her, still moving forward with his own momentum, she swept his leading ankle with a precise kick. Not a wild swing, but a targeted strike at the joint, angled to collapse his stance. Cody's feet went out from under him. His forward motion carried him the rest of the way. He crashed into an empty table, sending trays and dishes scattering across the floor. He went down hard, tangled in overturned chairs, and stayed down. The mess hall erupted. Shouts, gasps. Someone near the back yelled something that no one could make out over the noise. The phones were recording openly now. Word was spreading through the dining facility the way word always spreads in a confined space full of people. Instantly, without control. Tyler Hannigan stood frozen. He had watched Garrett go down in 2 seconds. He had watched Cody go down in 4. His brain was trying to process what was happening, but the image didn't fit the frame he had built in his mind. He had walked up to that table expecting confrontation with a woman who would back down. What he was seeing instead was something he had no reference point for. Something that did not belong in a mess hall at a naval station on a Tuesday morning. Elliot Ashford took a step backward. His hands came up, palms out, the universal gesture of someone who was no longer part of whatever this was. He had not thrown a punch. He had not grabbed anyone. He had stood in a circle around a table and said nothing, and now 2 of his friends were on the floor, and the woman they had been trying to intimidate was standing in the center of the room with barely a hair out of place. Tyler made his decision. It was not a good decision, but it was the only one his pride would allow. He charged. He came forward with his fists raised, leading with his right, trying to close the distance fast enough that his size advantage would matter. It was the kind of attack that worked against opponents who were smaller and slower. Kara was smaller. She was not slower. She sidestepped. Tyler's momentum carried him past her. As he passed, she caught his extended right arm with both hands, redirected his forward motion downward and over her hip, and executed a throw that used his own weight against him. It was textbook. It was precise. Tyler flew over her shoulder and landed on his back on the mess hall floor. The impact drove the air out of him and sent a shock through his spine that made every muscle in his body go temporarily numb. 15 seconds. Total. 3 of the 4 recruits were on the ground or unable to continue. The 4th, Elliot, stood with his hands raised, backing away slowly, his face white. The mess hall fell silent. Not completely silent. There were still sounds. The hum of the ventilation system, The distant clatter of the kitchen, a phone ringing somewhere in the building, but the human noise stopped. Every sailor in that room was staring at the same thing, at Kara Mitchell, standing in the center of the aftermath, barely breathing hard, scanning the faces around her with the same calm, systematic attention she had used to count exits when she walked in 40 minutes earlier. Master Chief Ray Dawson pushed back from his table and stood up. He moved through the crowd that had formed around the incident with the quiet authority of a man who did not need to raise his voice to be noticed. Sailors parted for him without being asked. He had 28 years on this base. Everyone knew who he was. He stopped at the edge of the circle and took in the scene. Tyler on the floor, one hand pressed against his lower back, trying to sit up. Garrett still bent over, breathing in short, labored pulls, the shock of the celiac strike fading, but the pain still echoing through his body. Cody tangled among overturned chairs, holding his ankle, his face flushed with something that was not quite pain and not quite humiliation, but some combination of both. Elliot standing apart, hands still raised, eyes fixed on the ground. And Kara, standing still, waiting. Dawson looked at her. She looked back. In that exchange, brief, wordless, something passed between them that no one else in the room could have read. Recognition, not of identity, not yet, of capability. Dawson had seen enough combat operators in his career to know one when he was looking at one. The way she had moved, the economy of it, the precision, that was not something you learned in a self-defense class or even in standard Navy combat training. That was something else entirely. Everyone step back, Dawson said. His voice was calm and carried without effort. The crowd moved. Give them room. The mess hall began to exhale. Garrett straightened up slowly. His breathing was returning to normal, but his face was still pale, and his hands were shaking in a way he couldn't control. He looked at Kara with an expression that was equal parts pain and confusion. The look of someone whose entire understanding of a situation had just been demolished. Tyler managed to get to his feet. He moved carefully, one hand still on his lower back. And when he looked at Kara, the arrogance that had carried him to that table was completely gone, replaced by something rawer, something that looked like the beginning of understanding. "We made a mistake," Tyler said. His voice was quieter than it had been 5 minutes ago, much quieter. Kara did not respond to him. She turned to Elliot. Elliot lowered his hands. He looked at her, and then he looked away. He could not hold her gaze, not because he was afraid of her, because he was ashamed. He had stood in that circle. He had been part of it, and when it mattered, when a single word from him might have changed what happened, he had said nothing. "I'm sorry," he said. The words came out uneven. "We didn't know." Kara held his gaze for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then she picked up her tray from the table, set it on the nearest clear surface, and turned to Master Chief Dawson. "Chief," she said, simply. Dawson nodded. He understood. There was nothing left to say in this room. Whatever came next would not happen here. He turned and began walking toward the corridor that led to the administrative offices. Kara fell into step beside him. The crowd parted again. Phones followed her movement. 6, 7, 8 devices recording as she walked out of the mess hall with the same measured pace she had walked in with 40 minutes earlier. Behind her, the mess hall began to fill with noise again. The kind of noise that comes after something extraordinary. Not the noise of conversation returning to normal, but the noise of people trying to process what they had just seen. Whispered versions of what had happened. Replays on phone screens. The beginnings of a story that would be told and retold for years. The 4 recruits stood among the wreckage of their own assumptions. None of them spoke for a long time. Dawson's office was small, a metal desk, 2 chairs, a window that looked out onto the parade ground where sailors moved in formation in the gray morning light. He closed the door behind them, and the noise of the base disappeared. The room was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. the quiet of a space where serious things were discussed. "Have a seat, Petty Officer Mitchell," Dawson said. He did not sit down himself. Not yet. He stood behind his desk with his hands flat on the surface, studying her with the careful, unhurried attention of someone who had spent decades reading people in exactly this kind of situation. Kara sat down. Her posture was straight but relaxed, the posture of someone who had been in rooms like this before, in situations considerably more dangerous than this one. "I've been in the Navy for 28 years, Dawson began. He spoke slowly, deliberately, the way a man speaks when he is choosing his words with care. "I've served with Marines, Army Rangers. I've worked alongside some very specialized units during deployments I can't talk about in detail. What I saw you do out there, that wasn't standard Navy combat training." He paused, let the statement sit. Kara said nothing. She waited. "Those movements were precise," Dawson continued, "efficient, designed to neutralize a threat using the minimum amount of force necessary. The way you read their body language, the way you anticipated each attack before it happened, the way you controlled the entire engagement from start to finish." He straightened up, looked at her directly. "That's not something you learn in a classroom. That's something you earn over years of the most demanding training in the military." Still, Kara said nothing. Her expression gave away nothing. Dawson opened a folder on his desk. Kara's service record. He read from it without looking up. "According to your file, you're a logistics specialist, 2nd class. Graduated basic training 2 years ago. Stationed here 8 months. Clean record. Good evaluations. Nothing unusual." He looked up. "But logistics specialists don't fight like that." The room was very quiet. Dawson held her gaze. He was not guessing anymore. He knew. "I was right, wasn't I?" he said, quietly. "You're not really a logistics specialist." Kara met his eyes. She held them for 3 seconds. Then she spoke. "Chief, I need to make a phone call," she said. "There are people who need to be notified about this situation before I can discuss anything with you." Dawson nodded. He had expected this. "Use my phone," he said. "Take whatever time you need. I'll be outside." He stepped out of the office and closed the door behind him. He positioned himself in the corridor, close enough to ensure no one entered or overheard, far enough to give her privacy. He had seen this pattern before. In 30 years of service, he had encountered men and women whose real roles could not be discussed openly. He knew how the protocol worked. He knew that the conversation he was about to have with this woman would be carefully controlled, and that the information she shared would be exactly what she was authorized to share and nothing more. He waited. Inside the office, Kara picked up the desk phone and dialed a number from memory. The number she had memorized but hoped never to use, except in exactly this kind of situation. The line connected after 2 rings. "Yes," said a voice, male, neutral, no greeting, no identification. "This is Falcon 7, Kara said. "I have a blown cover situation. The incident at Norfolk has already been documented on multiple devices. I need immediate guidance." There was a pause, the sound of typing in the background. Someone, somewhere, pulling up her file, her current assignment, her operational status. "Stand by," the voice said. Kara waited. Through the small window behind Dawson's desk, she could see sailors crossing the parade ground. Normal morning, normal movements. No one out there knew what had just happened in the mess hall. Not yet. Within an hour, they would. Within 2 hours, it would be on the base network. Within 6, it would be somewhere Kara could not control. The voice returned. "Falcon 7, you are authorized to reveal your SEAL status to the senior enlisted personnel you are currently speaking with. A cover adjustment will be implemented within 24 hours. Your current mission assignment remains unchanged." "Understood," Kara said. "What about the incident report and witness statements?" "Local command will receive appropriate guidance within the hour. The incident will be classified as justified self-defense. No disciplinary action will be taken against you." A pause. Then the voice added something that changed the weight of the conversation. However, you need to understand that your cover identity is now compromised on this base. The footage is already circulating. We cannot contain it at the local level. Kara had known this. She had known it the moment Garrett's hand touched her arm, and she made the decision to fight instead of walk away. But hearing it confirmed, hearing the official acknowledgement that 8 months of careful, meticulous cover work had just been undone in 15 seconds, carried a different kind of weight. "Will I be reassigned?" she asked. "Not immediately. We need you to complete your current objectives first, but expect a new assignment within the next few months." "Understood. Is there anything else you need?" "No." The line went dead. Kara set the phone down carefully. She sat in the quiet of Dawson's office for 30 seconds, not moving, not thinking about the fight, not thinking about the recruits, thinking about the mission. 8 months of work. The files she had been building on Colonel Brooks Hannigan, the communications she had intercepted, the patterns she had documented, piece by piece, visit by visit, over the course of 240 days of cover work at this base. That work was not finished, and the person she had been sent here to watch now had a reason, a very specific reason, to pay attention to her. She stood up, straightened her uniform, and opened the door. Dawson was waiting exactly where she had left him. He turned when she appeared, read her expression, or rather read the absence of expression, which told him more than any visible emotion would have, and stepped back to let her pass. "Chief," Kara said. She stopped in the corridor and faced him. "You were correct about my training background. I am a Navy SEAL. My presence here is related to a classified mission that I cannot discuss in detail. The logistics specialist cover was designed to allow me to operate without drawing attention." Dawson absorbed this. He did not react visibly. 28 years had taught him to keep his face still when it mattered. But something shifted behind his eyes. A recalculation, a reassessment of everything he had observed about this woman over the past 8 months, reframed in an instant. "Well," he said after a moment, "that plan just went out the window, didn't it?" Kara almost smiled. It was the closest she came to any visible emotion since the fight had ended. "It wasn't my intention to reveal my capabilities," she said. "They didn't give me much choice." "No," Dawson said. He had heard the witness statements already, relayed to him by a sailor who had been sitting 3 tables away from the incident. He knew what had happened before the fight. The warnings, the confrontation, the recruits' refusal to leave. "You gave them every chance, more than most people would have." He paused, then carefully, "What happens now?" "Now," Kara said, "I finish what I came here to do." Dawson studied her for a moment. He understood, even without the details, that the situation was more complicated than a blown cover. There was something else at stake, something she could not tell him, and something that the next few days would either resolve or destroy. He nodded. "Whatever you need," he said, "you have it." Kara acknowledged this with a single nod of her own. Then she turned and walked down the corridor toward the administrative wing, where Captain Whitfield's office was located, and where the first of many difficult conversations was about to begin. Behind her, the base was waking up to what had happened. Word was spreading the way it always spreads in a place where thousands of people live and work in close quarters. Fast, distorted, amplified. By the time Kara reached the end of the corridor, the story had already changed 3 times in the retelling. By the time she climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, someone had posted a clip online. By the time she knocked on Captain Whitfield's door, the clip had been viewed 40,000 times. And somewhere outside Norfolk, in a secure office in a building that had no visible signage, on a street that most people drove past without noticing, a man named Colonel Brooks Hannigan was watching the same clip on a tablet screen. He watched it twice. Not the fight. He watched Kara's face. He had seen that face before. Colonel Brooks Hannigan watched the video 3 times. He did not watch it in his office at the Pentagon. He watched it on a secure tablet in a room on the 4th floor of a building in Alexandria, Virginia, that had no name on the exterior and no listing in any public directory. The room had no windows. The air conditioning hummed at a constant, low frequency that most people stopped hearing after 20 minutes. Hannigan had been in rooms like this for the better part of his career. He was comfortable in them the way a surgeon is comfortable in an operating theater. The first time he watched the video, he watched the fight. 15 seconds, 4 recruits, 1 woman. The efficiency of it registered in his mind the way technical data registers, quickly, analytically, filed away. The second time he watched her face, he paused the video at the moment Kara stood up from the table, zoomed in. The image was grainy, shot from a distance on a phone, compressed by whatever platform had already begun distributing it, but it was clear enough. He studied the face on the screen with the careful attention of a man who had spent 30 years in military intelligence learning to recognize faces. He had seen this face before, not recently, not in person, in a photograph. A surveillance photograph taken 6 weeks ago by a private security firm that Hannigan retained for his own protection. A firm that reported directly to him and to no one else. The photograph had been part of a routine sweep. His security detail flagged anyone who appeared in his vicinity more than twice. This woman had appeared 3 times in the span of 2 weeks, always at a distance, always in a location where her presence could be explained by proximity to Norfolk Naval Station. Hannigan had noted it. He had not acted on it immediately. He had assumed it was internal affairs, a preliminary observation, the kind of low-level surveillance that happened to senior officers from time to time when budgets were scrutinized or contracts were questioned. He had filed it and moved on. He was looking at it now with different eyes. He set the tablet down on the desk in front of him and sat very still for approximately 40 seconds. Then he picked up a phone, not the one on the desk, a different one, smaller, kept in the inside pocket of his jacket, and dialed a number. The call connected after 1 ring. "It's the woman from the Norfolk surveillance photos," Hannigan said. No greeting, no preamble. "The one flagged 6 weeks ago. She's Navy, possibly Special Operations. I need to know everything about her within 12 hours. Family, background, vulnerabilities." He paused, listened. "Yes," he said, "that kind of urgency." He ended the call and set the phone down. Then he watched the video one more time. Not the fight, not the face. This time he watched the way she moved through the aftermath, the way she stood in the center of the chaos and scanned the room with the same calm, systematic attention she might have used to scan a battlefield. He knew what that kind of calm meant. He had seen it in operators before. The kind of calm that did not come from confidence. It came from training so deep that fear had been burned out of the system entirely, replaced by something colder and more useful. Hannigan turned off the tablet and sat in the quiet of the windowless room. He had contingencies for situations like this. He had been building contingencies for years, but contingencies worked best when you controlled the timeline. The video had already been seen by millions of people. The woman's face was already public. Whatever she had been doing at Norfolk, whatever she had been building against him over the past 8 months, was now exposed in a way that cut both directions. She was exposed, but so was he the moment she finished whatever she had come to Norfolk to find. He needed to know how close she was, and he needed to make her stop. The first step was finding out who she loved. Captain Laura Whitfield had been in the Navy for 22 years. She had risen through the ranks with the steady, unremarkable competence of someone who understood that leadership was not about being the loudest person in the room. It was about being the most prepared. She kept her office clean, her desk organized, her responses measured. When a crisis arrived, and in her experience, crises always arrived, she dealt with it the way a surgeon deals with a complication during surgery, calmly, methodically, without the luxury of panic. The crisis arrived at 0832 on a Tuesday morning in the form of a knock on her office door. Lieutenant Commander Hayes entered with a tablet in one hand and a printed summary in the other. His face carried the expression of a man who had just realized that his morning was about to become significantly more complicated than he had planned. "Ma'am," he said, "we have a situation." Whitfield looked up from the report she had been reading. "Summarize." Hayes handed her the tablet. On the screen was the video, already playing on loop on 3 different social media platforms. He had captured the view count at the bottom of the screen before handing it over. 47,000 views, and rising. "Incident in the mess hall this morning," Hayes said. 4 recruits confronted a female sailor. She neutralized 3 of them in under 15 seconds. The 4th backed off voluntarily. Multiple witnesses, multiple recordings. The footage is already being shared across platforms. Whitfield watched the video without expression. She watched it once, completely, from beginning to end. Then she set the tablet down on her desk. "Who is she?" Whitfield asked. "Petty Officer Mitchell, logistics specialist, 8 months on base, clean record, nothing in her file that would suggest—" Hayes stopped. He had watched the video too. He understood that the file and the video were telling 2 completely different stories. Master Chief Dawson escorted her to his office after the incident. They have been in a closed-door conversation for approximately 40 minutes. Whitfield nodded. She was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Media inquiries would start arriving within the hour. The Pentagon would be notified by someone, if they hadn't been already. The 4 recruits needed to be evaluated medically, debriefed, and kept away from cameras. "What's the status of the recruits?" she asked. "Medical has seen all 4. Minor injuries. Garrett Whitmore has some bruising around the solar plexus. Cody Brennan has a mild ankle sprain. Tyler Hannigan has back soreness from the impact. Elliot Ashford was not physically involved in the altercation." "Ashford was part of the group that surrounded her?" "Yes, ma'am. He did not make physical contact. Multiple witnesses confirm he attempted to disengage before the fight began." Whitfield filed this away. She would need to speak with each of them individually. But first, she needed to understand what she was actually dealing with. And for that, she needed to talk to Petty Officer Mitchell. She reached for the phone on her desk. Then she stopped. Something else had arrived in her inbox. A message flagged with a priority code she had seen only twice in her career. It was not from the Pentagon. It was not from Naval Special Warfare Command. It was from the office of Colonel Brooks Hannigan, Military Intelligence Division. The message was brief, 3 sentences. It asked Captain Whitfield to handle the Norfolk Mess Hall incident with discretion and to avoid unnecessary media attention that could compromise ongoing intelligence operations. It was signed by Hannigan's aide. It carried no official authority to direct her actions, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that came from knowing who was behind it. Whitfield read the message twice. Then she set the phone down without calling anyone. She knew Colonel Hannigan. Not personally, they had never met in the same room, but she knew his name. She knew his position. She knew that military intelligence officers of his rank did not send courtesy messages to base commanders unless they had a reason to care about what was happening on that base. Whitfield did not comply with the request. She was not going to suppress media attention or handle this quietly on behalf of someone she had not spoken to directly. That was not how she operated. But she also did not report the message. Not yet. Not until she understood what it meant. She picked up the phone again and called Master Chief Dawson's office. The recruits were separated within the hour. Each of them was moved to a different section of the base, not as a disciplinary measure, but as a procedural one. The base counselor was notified. Individual debriefing sessions were scheduled. Medical records were updated. It was all handled quietly, efficiently, by the machinery of a military installation that had dealt with thousands of incidents like this before. Except that none of the incidents had been quite like this one. Tyler Hannigan sat alone in a small conference room on the 2nd floor of the administrative building. The room had a table, 4 chairs, and a single window that looked out onto a parking lot. He sat in one of the chairs with his back against the wall, a position that felt safer than sitting in the middle of the room, though he could not have explained why. His back still ached from the impact with the floor. Not badly enough to remind him, every time he shifted in his seat, of what had happened, of how quickly it had happened, of how completely and utterly he had misjudged the situation. He had called his father twice since leaving the mess hall. Both calls went to voicemail. This was unusual. Colonel Hannigan always answered Tyler's calls, not out of affection, but out of the habit of a man who did not like to miss information. The voicemail was a silence that Tyler did not know how to interpret. So he sat in the conference room and waited and tried to understand what had just happened to him. Garrett Whitmore was in the medical bay, sitting on the edge of an examination table while a corpsman checked his vitals. The bruising around his solar plexus had already begun to darken, a deep purple-black mark that spread across his abdomen in the exact shape of Kara's elbow strike. It hurt when he breathed too deeply. It hurt when he laughed, though he had not laughed since the mess hall. He was not thinking about the pain. He was thinking about the precision of the strike, the way it had hit exactly the right spot. Not a guess, not a wild swing, but a targeted, surgical impact on a specific point in his body. He had read about the celiac plexus in a biology class in high school, years ago. He had not understood then what it meant for someone to know exactly where it was and exactly how hard to hit it. He understood now. He pulled out his phone and began searching. Navy SEAL training, female operators, what it took to qualify. The search results filled his screen, and he read them with the focused attention of someone trying to understand the distance between where he stood and where the woman in the mess hall had arrived. The distance was enormous. Cody Brennan was in his barracks, lying on his bunk with his injured ankle elevated on a pillow. The ankle throbbed. Not seriously. The corpsman had confirmed it was a mild sprain, nothing structural. But the physical discomfort was secondary to something else he was processing. Cody was not humiliated. This surprised him because humiliation was what he had expected to feel, what everyone around him seemed to expect him to feel. Instead, what he felt was something closer to awe. He replayed the fight in his mind, not as a defeat but as a demonstration, a master class in something he had never seen before. The economy of it, the control, the way she had read each of them before they moved, anticipated every attack, and responded with exactly the force that was needed, and not a single ounce more. He began telling the story to a sailor who came by to check on him. Not as a joke, not with the self-deprecating humor he usually used to deflect uncomfortable truths. He told it straight, with respect. The sailor listened, eyes widening, and asked Cody to tell it again. Cody did, and this time the story was better. Not because he embellished it, but because he had figured out what it was actually about. Elliot Ashford was alone. He had not gone to the medical bay. He had not been injured. He sat on a bench outside the barracks in the gray afternoon light, and he stared at the ground, and he thought about the moment in the mess hall when he had opened his mouth to say something and closed it again without speaking. He had known. From the beginning, he had known that what they were doing was wrong. Not wrong in the abstract, theoretical way that people know things are wrong when they are not personally involved. Wrong in the specific, immediate way. He had felt it in his chest when Tyler started talking, felt it tighten when the group moved toward Kara's table, felt it pull at him like a physical force when they surrounded her. He had opened his mouth. He had started to say something, and then Tyler had looked at him. Not a threat, exactly, but a look that carried the weight of the group's expectation. And Elliot had closed his mouth and stayed silent. That silence was the thing he could not stop replaying. Not the fight, not the aftermath, the silence. He pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. He began typing. Not a message to anyone, just words, coming out in an order that did not quite make sense, but that felt necessary to release. He typed for several minutes. Then he stopped, read what he had written, and deleted it. He did not know what to do with what he was feeling, but he knew, with a clarity that surprised him, that he could not leave it where it was. The video crossed 50 million views by 1400 hours. Captain Whitfield learned this from Hayes, who had been monitoring the social media landscape since the incident. The number was not slowing down, it was accelerating. News outlets were beginning to pick up the story, not the full story, not yet, but the surface of it. A female Navy sailor had taken down 4 male recruits in a mess hall. The footage was extraordinary. The identity of the woman was unknown. Whitfield held a brief meeting with her communications staff. They decided not to issue a formal statement. Not yet. Any acknowledgement from the base would only drive more attention to the story. They would wait until they had a clearer picture of the situation, including who Petty Officer Mitchell actually was, before deciding how to respond publicly. The meeting lasted 12 minutes. After it ended, Whitfield sat alone in her office for 10 minutes, thinking about the message from Colonel Hannigan's office. She had not reported it. She had not acted on it, but she had not forgotten it either. It sat in the back of her mind like a stone at the bottom of a clear pool, visible, solid, and impossible to ignore once you knew it was there. Kara Mitchell spent the afternoon in secure quarters. The room was small, a single bunk, a desk, a chair, a door that locked from the outside but could be opened from the inside. It was not a cell. It was a precaution. Someone in her situation, a blown cover operator with an active mission, needed to be kept away from casual observation until the situation was clarified. Kara sat on the edge of the bunk. The room was quiet. No windows. The hum of the ventilation system was the only sound. She was not thinking about the fight. The fight was over. It had lasted 15 seconds, and it had changed nothing about the physical reality of her life. She was still breathing. She was still here. The 4 recruits were alive and not seriously injured. The fight itself was a solved problem. What she was thinking about was the mission. 8 months, 240 days of cover work, 240 mornings of waking up and putting on someone else's identity, eating in a mess hall where she could not be herself, watching a man, Colonel Hannigan, from a distance that felt both necessary and insufficient. She had built a file. She had documented patterns. She had intercepted communications through channels that required her physical presence on this base, at specific times, in specific locations. The file was not complete. She needed 2 more weeks, maybe 3, to close the final gaps in the evidence against Hannigan. 2 weeks. That was all she had needed. And now the timeline had been compressed into something much shorter, because the video had exposed her face to anyone with an internet connection. And Colonel Hannigan was almost certainly among them. She thought about Tyler Hannigan, about the fact that his father's son was on this base, 300 yards from where she was sitting, and that the connection between them was now visible to anyone who looked closely enough. She thought about the phone call she had made to her command, the authorization to reveal her status to Dawson, the confirmation that no disciplinary action would be taken. And she thought about the choice she had made in the mess hall, the choice to fight instead of walk away. It had been the wrong choice, tactically, strategically, by every standard she had been trained to apply. Protocol was clear: disengage, walk away, report. She had had 3 opportunities to do exactly that, and she had stayed. She had stayed because walking away would have meant losing Tyler as a point of access to his father. She had stayed because the mission mattered more than the cover. She had stayed because, in the moment, the calculation had been simple: the mission or her anonymity. She had chosen the mission. She did not regret the choice, but she understood the cost of it, and the cost was significant. The door opened at 18:30 hours. Dawson entered with a tablet in his hand and an expression that Kara had not seen on his face before. It was not concern exactly. It was something closer to urgency, controlled, measured, but present. "You need to see this," he said. He handed her the tablet. On the screen was a secure communication from Naval Special Warfare Command. The message was brief and direct. Kara read it once, then read it again. The first part confirmed what she already knew. Her cover identity was compromised. A new cover would be developed within 24 hours. Her mission assignment remained active pending final assessment. The second part was new. Intelligence had flagged an unusual communication pattern originating from Colonel Hannigan's private security network. Within the past 6 hours, Hannigan's people had begun actively searching for personal information connected to Kara's real identity. Not her cover identity, her real one. The search included family members. Kara set the tablet down on the bunk beside her. She did not move for several seconds. Dawson watched her. He had read the message before bringing it to her. He understood what it meant, or at least, he understood enough. Someone powerful had identified Kara as a threat, and that someone was now looking for leverage. "How much time do we have?" Kara asked. Her voice was steady, completely steady, the way it had been in the mess hall before the fight. "The extraction window opens in 72 hours, Dawson said. "That's when your command can pull you out cleanly. But if Hannigan's people find what they're looking for before then..." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Kara stood up from the bunk. She walked to the small desk in the corner of the room and sat down. She pulled the tablet toward her and began reviewing the mission files she had access to. The documents, the communications intercepts, the pattern analysis she had been building for 8 months. Everything she had. Everything she still needed. She had 72 hours. The question was whether that was enough time to finish the job, or whether she needed to find another way. Dawson stood near the door and watched her work. He did not offer advice. He did not suggest a plan. He understood, instinctively, that this was her decision to make. His role was to support whatever she decided. That was what a mentor did. Not lead, not direct. Stand close enough to be useful, and far enough away to let the other person think. After several minutes, Kara looked up from the tablet. "I need one person," she said. "Someone inside the recruit group who can move without drawing attention. Someone with access to Tyler Hannigan's personal space and communications." Dawson considered this. "The Ashford kid," he said. "Elliot Ashford. He's the one who didn't participate in the physical confrontation. Multiple witnesses confirmed he tried to disengage before it started." "What do we know about him?" "Ohio, 20 years old. No family connections to anyone of significance. Clean record. The base counselor flagged him this afternoon. He's carrying guilt about what happened. Significant guilt." Kara nodded slowly. Guilt in the right person was not a weakness. It was fuel. It meant the conscience was still working. It meant the person was capable of making a different choice the next time the moment came. "Set up a meeting," she said. "Somewhere private. Somewhere that won't be noticed." Dawson nodded. He moved toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "Kara," he said. It was the first time he had used her first name. The use of it was deliberate, a small shift in the relationship, from professional to something closer to personal. Not close, but closer than it had been. "Whatever happens in the next 72 hours, he said, "you're not doing this alone." He left the room. The door closed behind him. Kara turned back to the tablet and kept working. The meeting with Elliot Ashford took place the following evening, in a storage room on the ground floor of the administrative building. The room smelled of cleaning supplies and old paper. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead. It was not a comfortable space. It was a private one, and privacy was what mattered. Elliot arrived looking like he had not slept. His face was pale, and there were shadows under his eyes that suggested he had spent most of the previous night awake. He stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside, as if he were still deciding whether to enter. Then he saw Kara standing near the back of the room with her arms at her sides, and something in his expression shifted. Not fear, but something close to it. The recognition that the woman he had stood in a circle around 24 hours ago was now looking at him directly, with full attention, and that this conversation was going to be different from anything he had experienced before. "Ashford," Kara said, not a greeting, an acknowledgement. "Ma'am," Elliot said. He stood at attention instinctively, old habit from basic training. "Stand down," Kara said. "This isn't that kind of conversation." Elliot relaxed his posture, though not entirely. He was not sure how to stand in front of this woman. Nothing in his training had prepared him for this specific situation. Kara studied him for a moment. She was reading him the way she read everyone. Body language, micro-expressions, the small tells that revealed more than words did. What she saw was consistent with what Dawson had reported. Guilt. Genuine, deep guilt. Not the performative kind that people display to make themselves feel better. The real kind. The kind that kept you awake at night and made your hands feel heavy. "I'm going to tell you something," Kara said, "and I need you to listen before you respond." Elliot nodded. Tyler Hannigan's father is a senior officer in military intelligence. His name is Colonel Brooks Hannigan. He is under investigation for corruption, specifically for illegal activity connected to weapons procurement contracts. I have been here for 8 months gathering evidence against him. That is the reason I am at this base. That is the reason I have been watching Tyler. She paused. Let the information settle. "I did not tell you this so you could understand the full scope of what is happening. I told you this because I need your help. Not because you owe me anything. Not because I am ordering you. Because you are in a position to do something that matters, and I think you want to." Elliot was very still. His face had gone through several changes as Kara spoke. Surprise, then confusion, then something that looked like the pieces of a puzzle suddenly clicking into place. Tyler's father, someone important in D.C., the way Tyler had always spoken about his family with a strange mixture of pride and tension. "What do you need me to do?" Elliot asked. "I need access to a communication between Tyler's father and another person. A specific message that confirms the full scope of what Hannigan has been involved in. I believe that message exists on Tyler's personal devices, his phone or his laptop. Tyler may have seen it. He may not have understood what it meant." "Does Tyler know about this? About you?" "Not yet, but he will. And when he does, I will need him to cooperate willingly. That is the second thing I need from you. I need you to talk to him, not about me, about his father. About what kind of man his father actually is. You know Tyler better than most people on this base. You know what he respects. Find the right way to tell him." Elliot was quiet for a long time. The fluorescent light buzzed. Somewhere in the building above them, footsteps moved along a corridor. "Why me?" Elliot asked. The question was genuine, not defensive, not suspicious. He simply wanted to know. Kara looked at him steadily. "Because you were the only one in that mess hall who knew it was wrong," she said. "Before it happened, before anyone got hurt, you knew. And that tells me something about who you are, even if you didn't act on it yesterday." The words landed. Elliot felt them the way you feel a blow that doesn't hurt but shifts something inside you, rearranges the furniture of your conscience without breaking anything. He nodded, once, firmly. "I'll do it," he said. Kara held his gaze for one more second. Then she nodded back, and the conversation was over. Tyler Hannigan learned the truth about his father on the afternoon of the third day. It did not come from Kara. It did not come from Dawson, or from Captain Whitfield, or from anyone in the military chain of command. It came from Elliot Ashford, who had spent the previous 36 hours thinking carefully about how to have a conversation that could not be taken back once it was spoken. They sat together in the mess hall, the same mess hall where everything had started, though the table they chose was different. Far from the corner where Kara had been sitting. The lunch crowd was thinning. The noise level was manageable. Elliot had chosen the location deliberately, somewhere normal, somewhere that did not feel like an interrogation room or a confession booth. He told Tyler what he knew. Not everything. He did not have clearance for the details of the intelligence operation, and he did not pretend to. But he told Tyler what Kara had shared with him, that his father was under investigation, that the investigation was serious, that the evidence was real. Tyler listened without interrupting. His face did not change in the way Elliot had expected it to. There was no explosion of denial, no rage directed outward. Tyler went very quiet, the kind of quiet that comes when something you have suspected for a long time is finally confirmed by someone else's mouth. "How long have you known?" Tyler asked. His voice was flat, not angry, exhausted. "I didn't know," Elliot said. "Not until yesterday." Tyler nodded. He stared at the table for a long time. Then he said something that Elliot had not expected. "My sister has been asking questions." Elliot waited. "She's 15. She lives with my mother in Houston. She called me last week and asked why Dad never comes home on weekends anymore. Why there's always money in the account, but we never go anywhere." Tyler paused. "I told her he was just busy. I've been telling her that for 2 years." The mess hall noise continued around them, trays clanging, conversations overlapping, the ordinary sounds of hundreds of people eating lunch. Tyler and Elliot sat in the middle of it, in a silence that was entirely their own. "If this investigation goes forward," Tyler said, "everything comes out. My sister finds out what he's been doing. My mother finds out. Everyone finds out." "Yes," Elliot said. Tyler was quiet again. A long time. Long enough for the lunch crowd to thin further and for the light coming through the windows to shift from bright to something softer. "Then it should go forward," Tyler said. He did not say it loudly. He did not say it with conviction or resolve or any of the emotions that a dramatic moment was supposed to carry. He said it quietly, the way a man says something when he has already accepted the weight of it and is simply speaking the truth out loud so that it existed somewhere other than his own mind. Elliot nodded. He did not say anything else. There was nothing left to say. The evidence was retrieved on the evening of the third day, 41 hours before the extraction window closed. Elliot accessed Tyler's laptop in the barracks room they shared, with Tyler's knowledge, with Tyler's password, with Tyler's permission given in a short, wordless exchange that required no elaboration. The message was there, buried in a folder that Tyler had never opened, forwarded automatically from a shared family account that Colonel Hannigan had not realized his son had access to. It was a direct communication between Hannigan and another senior officer, a man whose name appeared in the intelligence file Kara had been building for 8 months. The message confirmed what Kara's 8 months of work had suggested, but could not yet prove. A coordinated scheme to manipulate weapons procurement contracts, diverting funds through shell companies and back channels that had been operating for years. Elliot copied the message. He did not read it fully. It was not his to read. He closed the laptop and handed the device containing the copy to Dawson, who had been waiting in the corridor outside the barracks with the patience of a man who had spent 28 years waiting for things to happen on someone else's timeline. Dawson delivered the file to Kara within the hour. Kara reviewed it in the secure quarters where she had been housed since the incident. The document was exactly what she needed. It closed the final gap in the case against Hannigan, the piece of evidence that transformed 8 months of circumstantial intelligence into something that could not be dismissed, ignored, or buried. She forwarded the complete file to Naval Special Warfare Command at 21:47 hours. The acknowledgement came back in 4 minutes. Captain Whitfield made her decision at 0600 the following morning. She had not slept. She had spent the night reviewing the situation from every angle she could see. The media exposure, the recruits, the message from Hannigan's office, the intelligence operation that had been running under her nose for 8 months without her knowledge. She had not been told about Kara's mission. She had not been read in. This was standard protocol for covert operations. Base commanders were kept in the dark to maintain plausible deniability, but it meant that Whitfield had received a direct communication from the target of that operation, asking her to suppress the incident, and she had not known, at the time, that it was a request from a corrupt officer trying to protect himself. She knew now. She picked up the secure phone on her desk and called the Inspector General's office directly. She reported two things. First, the content of the message she had received from Colonel Hannigan's office, requesting that the mess hall incident be handled quietly. Second, the threat that had been made against a family member of a service member currently stationed at Norfolk, a threat that had been communicated through an unofficial channel and that she had learned about through intelligence briefings provided to her that morning. The call lasted 7 minutes. When it ended, Whitfield set the phone down and sat in the quiet of her office for a moment. She had just bypassed the chain of command that Hannigan controlled. She had just reported a senior officer directly to the Inspector General. It was not the kind of action that went unnoticed. It was not the kind of action that was forgiven by the people who had something to lose. But it was the right action. And Laura Whitfield had spent 22 years in the Navy learning the difference between the two. The protection for Kara's sister was arranged within hours of Whitfield's report. Federal agents, civilian, not military, were dispatched to Billings, Montana, and made contact with Kara's sister that afternoon. The cover story was a routine security check connected to a family member's military service. It was not alarming. It was not suspicious. It was simply a presence, quiet, professional, and permanent enough to make any threat from Hannigan's side meaningless. Kara learned about the protection through Dawson, who brought her the confirmation at 1400 hours on the final day of the extraction window. She read the confirmation, set it down, said nothing for a long time. Dawson waited. He had learned over the past 72 hours that Kara Mitchell did not process emotion visibly. She processed it internally, quietly, in ways that other people could not see. The closest she came to showing anything was in the stillness, the moments when she stopped moving entirely and simply existed in the weight of whatever she was carrying. This was one of those moments. "Thank you," Kara said. 2 words, quiet, directed at Dawson, but carrying something larger than gratitude toward one person. It was the sound of someone acknowledging that the thing she had been most afraid of, the thing that had kept her on this base when every tactical instinct told her to leave, had been handled. Not by her, by other people, by a system that, when it worked because individuals chose to make it work. Dawson nodded. "It's done," he said. The extraction happened at 0300 hours on a Wednesday morning. A black sedan arrived at Norfolk Naval Station through a service gate on the eastern perimeter, a gate that was used for supply deliveries and maintenance vehicles, and that attracted no attention at that hour. The driver was civilian. The passenger in the back seat was a handler from Naval Special Warfare Command, a man Kara had never met in person, but whose voice she recognized from secure communications over the past 18 months. Kara was waiting at the service entrance of the administrative building. She carried a single bag, standard issue, no personal items. Everything she had brought to Norfolk 8 months ago that was not connected to her cover identity had already been removed and secured. The transfer of the mission files had been completed hours earlier. The case against Colonel Brooks Hannigan was in the hands of the Inspector General's office, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and 2 other agencies whose involvement Kara had not been told about and did not need to know. The work was done. 8 months of it, 240 days of being someone she was not, in a place she did not belong, watching a man she had never spoken to, building a case that would end his career. It was done. Before she got into the sedan, Kara stopped. Dawson was standing near the service entrance, in the shadow of the building where no one passing by would see him. He had come to see her off, not ceremonially, not with any official acknowledgement, simply to be present. The way he had been present throughout the past 72 hours, steady, quiet, close enough to be useful. He held out a piece of paper, folded once, no envelope. Kara took it. She did not open it. She looked at Dawson, and something passed between them. The same wordless exchange that had happened in the mess hall 3 days earlier when he had first recognized what she was. But this time it carried more weight. It carried everything that had happened since. "What is this?" Kara asked. Dawson was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the particular gravity of a man who had spent 28 years serving in silence and understood, more than most, what that silence cost. "Your real record," he said, "the parts I could find, the parts I could verify, your deployments, your kills, your qualifications, everything that's been buried under cover stories." He paused. "Someone should know what you actually did. I wanted it written down." Kara looked at the paper in her hand. She did not open it. She did not need to. She knew what was on it. She knew what it meant. Not the information itself, but the act of writing it down. The act of someone choosing to document the truth of her service, even when the system had decided that truth should not exist on any official page. She folded the paper carefully and placed it in the inside pocket of her jacket, close to her chest. "Thank you, Chief," she said. Dawson nodded once. Then he stepped back into the shadow of the building, and Kara turned and walked toward the sedan, and the door closed behind her, and the car moved quietly through the service gate and out onto the road. The base was silent at that hour. No one saw her leave. No one knew she was gone until the morning, when her quarters were found empty and her cover identity was officially closed out by the administrative staff. By then, Kara Mitchell was already somewhere else, already becoming someone else, already beginning the long, quiet work of disappearing again. But in the pocket of her jacket, folded carefully against her chest, the paper Dawson had given her stayed exactly where it was, written down, hidden, hers. 1 week later, Elliot Ashford found an envelope in his mailbox. No return address, no postmark that indicated where it had been sent from. Inside was a single piece of paper. On it, in handwriting he did not recognize, clean, precise, the kind of handwriting that suggested discipline, was a single sentence. "You made the right call." Elliot read it once, then he read it again. He stood in the corridor outside the mailroom for a long time, holding the paper in his hand, and he did not know who had sent it. He suspected, but he did not know. He folded it carefully and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, the same pocket where he kept his mother's letter. Tyler Hannigan filed his voluntary cooperation statement with the Inspector General's office on a Thursday morning. He did it alone. He did not tell anyone beforehand, not Garrett, not Cody, not Elliot. He walked into the IG's office, sat down across from a clerk he had never met, and began speaking. He spoke for 40 minutes. He told them everything he knew about his father's activities, not the classified details, which he did not have access to, but the patterns, the disappearances, the money, the phone calls that ended abruptly when Tyler walked into the room, the years of small lies that had accumulated into something large and undeniable. When he finished, the clerk thanked him for his cooperation and told him that his statement would be added to the existing file. Tyler nodded. He stood up, shook the clerk's hand, and walked out of the building into the afternoon light. He did not feel relieved. He did not feel proud. He felt the way a man feels after putting down something heavy that he has been carrying for a long time. Not lighter, exactly, but different, changed in a way that could not be undone. He called his sister that evening. The call lasted 20 minutes. He did not tell her about the investigation. He did not tell her about Kara Mitchell, or the mess hall, or any of it. He asked her about school. He asked her about her friends. He asked her if she was happy. She said yes. He said, "Good," and he meant it in a way he had not meant anything in a very long time.